what we're going to present is something that we've kind of put together thinking about who could this person be, who could play this role, this umbrella role of the Chief Risk and Reputation Officer for a company. The point here isn't to create just another chief amongst chiefs. The idea here, and maybe the title, should be something different. And again, titles and languages are always difficult to parse through, especially in the corporate environment, since everybody wants to be a chief, and many people are, but then again, they don't have really the standing or the resources required to do their job. The idea here is really to get to someone who can fill a C-level position, who has the accoutrements and the qualities of someone who can sit at the C-level and not and get the respect of the remaining C-level people. The idea here isn't to have 15 chiefs of something or other at the C-suite level or at the executive level. It's to have one person who has responsibility for what we're talking about, which is sort of the whole governance, risk, compliance, ethics, corporate responsibility, ball of wax, really, at the end of the day. All things that are interrelated, things that we don't always see as interrelated, but are. A lot of the themes that we each deal with in our respective silos end up being cross-cutting themes that are themes that really should be dealt with in a cross-functional way, and in a way that is positive and certainly not detrimental to the organization. And I actually believe that by having this kind of a role, you can actually turbocharge what you're doing in these areas and actually give value added to the company. So if you align, you have the cross-functional piece going on, and then you align what those functions are doing under an umbrella role like the Chief Risk and Reputation Officer, then you can also align that much better with the strategy and the business purpose of the organization. So the idea then is really to get someone in place. The decathlete sort of analogy that Jack just described is really someone who has to be a leader with a lot of leadership qualities and roles, but in this area. So a lot of the people who end up in the C-suite or even on boards are really the financial people, the business people, the people who are responsible for the profit and loss and for bringing in the revenues and what have you. And that's all good, but I think there's something missing from both the executive level and the board level, given the complexities and also the sort of the increase and velocity of global risks that exist for organizations. So the idea here is really to get someone in this role who can sit at the table, who has all of these different qualities. Vision, for example, the vision to really put everything together and know where your organization is going in terms of governance, risk, compliance, corporate responsibility. Have deep knowledge maybe in one or two areas, as Jack said, but also have some knowledge in some of the other areas. The important thing there being that you want to surround yourself with really great subject matter experts in your organization. This person also needs to have a large degree of backbone, because at the end of the day, it's a tough job, it's a complex job, it's a relatively new job, and it also involves issues frequently that are difficult for an organization. There may be issues that are uncomfortable or that are dangerous, such as ethical or criminal violations potentially. And so this person has to have the backbone to speak truth to power, so to speak, and to be able to pursue the issues without fear of retribution. So there's that piece. Emotional intelligence obviously is a very important piece of any kind of leader, being able to read and understand what other people within your organization are saying. Leadership, I think we don't need to really dwell on that. Empathy is really important, clearly understanding what others are doing and feeling in order to be able to do your work. I'm going to skip over Gestalt because I want to use that as my last thought. Innovation is extremely important. I think one of the things that we lack in our areas frequently is innovation, coming up with new ideas, better ideas, more business savvy ideas, ideas that will allow the business to grow. So I think we have to start putting a slightly different cap on, and a lot of companies, not a lot, but some really good companies are starting to do that in terms of inventing new products that become, more sustainable products, for example. So innovation can be done at any kind of level, and certainly should be done within this area. Flexibility to pivot and change if you have to. Results, again, goes without saying. And going back to the word of gestalt, and from the previous slide, Jack emphasized the idea of connecting the dots. I think both of us really feel that at the end of the day, this role is a role that connects the dots, because the dots are all over the place, the functions are all over the place, the themes, the challenges, the risks are kind of all over the place. And if there's one really knowledgeable, intelligent, savvy Chief Risk and Reputation Officer who is seeing that big picture and then connecting that big picture to the overall business, that'll be a real value add to both the business people, to the board and its oversight and what have you. So let me move on to the next slide, where I'm just going to quickly give you our first example of a role that was of this nature. And then Jack is going to go into greater depth about his current role. Both of the roles that I'm going to describe are past roles for me, since I now have my own business. But years ago, I was the general counsel of the independent power subsidiary of PSE&G, the New Jersey utility. And we started as a startup, more or less, and ended up as a really big company. And my initial role was simply general counsel. And over time, a whole series of things were added to my portfolio, whether I wanted it or not. And they included many of the things that you see on this slide. The very first thing that happened naturally was the need to have a business ethics program, a global business ethics and compliance program that included putting a code of conduct together, some training. We had obviously the big issues that any infrastructure development company would have around the world of dealing with joint ventures and potential fraud and potential corruption and all kinds of other sort of serious issues. So having a business ethics and compliance program was really important. So that was the first piece of the puzzle. Then, and that included global anti-corruption, also dealing with local governments and regulators was another piece of that puzzle. There was no separate risk management, so risk management really resided under my portfolio. I also inherited the environmental health and safety team because we were all over the world, and we bought some properties that had serious problems, and we wanted to bring them up to speed and up to the standards and levels that we had in the U.S. Crisis management became a really important piece of my portfolio because there were so many places we were doing business that were dangerous, including places where there was guerrilla warfare in Latin America, where people were building power plants. So crisis management became part of that portfolio, security as well. And then finally, I also happened to be the corporate secretary. So in this portfolio, I had governance, I had legal, I had risk, I had ethics, I had environmental health and safety, and crisis management. And while my title was general counsel, really I was the chief risk and reputation officer because my role was to button these things down. I sat on the executive team of the company, and I reported into the board on a regular basis. So in looking at this paradigm that Jack and I have been talking about for a while now, looking back at my career, this actually was going on back 15 years ago. And I'm sure many of you, as you think about this, may be in a similar boat. And I think the point here is to make something that's maybe latent or dormant more obvious and more real, and really take it to the next level where we connect the dots and make it useful to our executive teams and our boards.